Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Weber. We're going to go over exercise principles, periodization, and program safety. So, learning goals, we're going to understand the three primary exercise principles, understand how to manipulate the principle of overload to limit training plateaus, understand the concept of periodization and supercompensation, recognize the longevity of common training residuals, and understand concepts related to optimizing program safety. So the three main exercise principles that you'll be discussing in the discussion board are either going to be specificity, overload, or progression. These are the fundamental principles of exercise. Understanding specificity, overload, and progression will help you select the right exercises for that particular individual. One, because specificity relates to what their goals are. So something as specific as a sport. Let's just say you have a soccer player. Something sports specific would be soccer, right? So the more specificity, the more specific. Let's just say you're working on somebody's hip, or you have somebody with a hip issue. You might have to work on hip mobility, hip strength, and then also maybe the surrounding joints. That would be specificity. So being specific to your training based on the individual. And in order, basically these principles have definitions that go along with them as well. So for specificity, for desired adaptation to occur in the body, stress must be appropriately and specifically applied. So if you want a particular adaptation, you have to stress that individual or body part specifically and appropriately. Overload, a training stress that challenges a psychological system above the level to which it is accustomed to. So let's just say you're accustomed to doing 10 push-ups in a row, and challenging would maybe be 15 to 20 push-ups, or maybe your bench press is just the bar, and then maybe you're going to add resistant bands, or maybe you're going to add overload. So overload meaning more weight. Progression, stress applied must continually be perceived as new for any physiological system to adjust. So in order for there to be progression, you have to continually develop and progress the exercise or the movement pattern for the system to be able to adjust. So if you're doing the same things all the time, the system will not adjust, and it will not continually adapt. Exercise principles. So initial improvements in physical fitness level, but lack of new overload causes little change. So overload and physical fitness level would be on the left side here. And then on the right side, we have continued improvement in physical fitness level due to progressive overload. So after you overload once, you have to overload again and again. Otherwise, it'll cause little to no change. So for progressive overload and for continued improvement in physical fitness, you have to continue to overload. Otherwise, you're just going to plateau here. Exercise principles. The magnitude of progressions employed in training program will be influenced by several factors, including training tenure, your experience. So the more experience you have, the more you're going to be able to develop specificity, progression, and overload principles. Also, there's genetic potential. You have the individual's ability to either develop speed or not develop speed, develop endurance, not develop endurance. So they also have genetic potential for muscle fiber as well. And then current physical condition. So progressions, depending on your physical condition, you might be starting from scratch. You might be starting with a morning mobility routine. You might be starting with some lightweight or isometric training and some core stabilization before you get into any multiplanar joint movements. And maybe you're focusing on single joint movements because the individual is going through some type of rehabilitation. And then you have nutrition and recovery, making sure that you're able to obviously hydrate yourself would be number one, to be able to eat properly before and after and during workouts, and to have the vitamins, minerals, and electrolytes in your body to recover. Periodization. So residual adaptations are strategically built upon each other. So periodization would be periodizing your workout. So going from strength to power to endurance, and then also doing that through macro and mesocycles. So macro cycle would be, the bigger picture, and mesocycles would be the smaller picture. Organize a sequential training phases using cyclical time periods for building block progressions. And adaptive responses from training are referred to as supercompensation. So you will overcompensate or supercompensate in the presence of new learning skills. So you're going to overcompensate, supercompensate from training, and that would be an adaptive response. So for instance, if you have to jump higher, your body might develop stronger calves for you to supercompensate or to be able to jump higher than the other individual, jumping for the ball. So load, and you have work capability, you have fatigue and recovery zones, supercompensation phase, and then return to preload level. So once the load stops, you want to recover because there'll be some fatigue, and then you're gonna be able to supercompensate once the fatigue and recovery is over, and then your workability gets a little bit lower after you supercompensate. It goes to that return to preload level. Okay, so that will be the 3 phases. So basically you're loading, you're recovering, and it takes a while to recover, and you'll then be able to supercompensate after your recovery. And then after that, you'll kind of go back to your preload level, okay? And that would be 3 phases of periodization. So you have longevity of common residual training effects. So aerobic endurance effects can last 30 to 5 days. Maximal strength effects can last 30 to 5 days. Anaerobic endurance effect, 18 to 4 days. Strength endurance effects, 15 to 5. Maximal speed effects, 5 to 3. So that's why you have to train things like maximal speed effects if you want them within smaller time periods, because if you're only sprinting once a month, you're not going to get any return. Same thing with strength and aerobic training. You have to train those frequently, okay? As far as strength and aerobic endurance, you obviously don't want to be running 5Ks every single day, but you could do something like strength every day. You could definitely do some type of speed work. 3 days a week would be fine, but you wouldn't want to just do it once a week if you're an athlete. Especially if you're an athlete, you want to be sprinting 3 to 4 days a week. Program safety, factors to consider for creating a safe environment. Client's acute condition, so how do they feel in that moment? You might have this perfect plan set up for them, but if they have stomach issues, or if they have a headache, and you have them jumping, they might not feel comfortable. They might want to do some type of mobility instead of, say, you had a jumping rope plan for their warm-up. Well, they might just want to walk. Are they hydrated? Do they look dry? Do their lips look dry? Do they have dry mouth? Do they not drink any water? Do they not bring any water? Mental distractions. So some of them can come in with distractions on their mind, like work, like the stock market, like maybe someone in their family is ill. Maybe they're ill. Maybe they shouldn't come in for the day. Maybe they have hypoglycemia or low sugar, and they might feel faint, and they could have excess fatigue. Maybe they're just coming in, they have no energy, and they just seem like they can't keep up. Or maybe there's postural adjustments that they need to make the training safe. So do they need to straighten their back on their one-arm rows? Do they need to embrace their core when they're doing a pull-up? That type of thing. Environmental temperature and humidity. So obviously, the hotter and more humid an environment is, the harder it is to perform work, because the more likely you are to lose electrolytes and water. So environment is really important. Cool, crisp air, like 70 degrees. to 50 degrees would be ideal. When you get over 70 to 80 to 90 degrees, you are more likely to have injuries. So establishing a clear workspace, e.g. no dumbbells or equipment to trip over. Got to have a clear workspace. Clients aren't going to like it if you have dumbbells on the ground and they're doing lunges and they accidentally hit one. You want to make sure that they have tons of space. They don't feel like they're, bothering another client that's next to you, or they don't want to feel too cramped. And ask them, be like, do you feel safe? Equipment operating condition. So making sure that you're using up-to-date and new equipment. You're not using old, rusty, or inexpensive equipment that could cause injury. Proper supervision, i.e. spotting, verbal or tactile cues, correct equipment. So spotting, if you're doing back squats, always give them a spot. Same thing with bench press, same thing with pull-ups, and any other exercises that are high weight or low rep exercises that can cause harm if they get stuck. It can include chest flies, chest bench, dumbbell press. Could even be rowing. You might even help them with, if they can't get it, maybe help push them for them. Verbal or tactile cues like depress your scapula or lower your scapula or lower your shoulder blades, or try not to bring your ears up to your shoulders, or shoulders up to the ears. So make sure that you're relaxing your shoulders. Draw the chest up, chin in, or stand up nice and tall. Make sure you're not leaning forward. Make sure you're not rounding your upper back. Tactile cues, maybe saying, all right, I want you to try to lift your knee into my hand and hip flexion, or maybe I want you to try to externally rotate your hip and try to push that foot into my hand, that type of thing. And then also having correct equipment like bands, kettlebells, dumbbells, cable machines, everything you need to have a appropriate workout. Could even include agility ladders, things that they're interested in learning. Maybe it's boxing, maybe it's a new skill. So program safety, talked about, maybe heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, dehydration. These are all part of heat exhaustion. Okay, so heat exhaustion, you have symptoms: faint, dizzy, headaches, profuse sweating, irritability, weak rapid pulse, shallow breathing, pale, cool, clammy skin, nausea or vomiting, and muscle cramps. So this would be heat exhaustion. Heat stroke would be absence of sweating, so they're no longer sweating because they're so dehydrated. Pulsating headache because their nervous systems may be breaking down. Hot, red, dry skin because they've been in the sun too long. High body temperature above 103, then it's very severe. They're vomiting, they have a rapid pulse, they're confused, they're convulsing, and they may lose consciousness. So that's when you would dial 911 if these symptoms occur. Heat exhaustion happens before heat stroke, so you can prevent heat stroke by noticing the signs of heat exhaustion. Have victim lie down in a cool, shaded, or conditioned area. Drink water if victim is conscious, and use caution when victim stands up. Apply cold compresses. Don't let them drive. Make sure somebody picks them up. Make sure their family knows they're okay. If it gets worse, call 911. Take action to a cool victim by any means. Place victim in a cool area. Wrap in a wet towel. Sponge victim with cool water. So those would be all the precautions to take if somebody was showing signs of heat stroke. And that's going to be it for program safety, exercise principle periodization. And if you have questions about any of these principles, these are the 3 principles that the FRS system goes over in depth. So I can always talk you through them. I think they're very important. Specificity is really important. What does the individual want to learn? And why do they want to learn it? And how are you going to specifically target those areas? And then overload, how you manage the load, and then progression, making sure that you start from level 1 and progressing to level 10, and not starting with level 10 and then degressing. So progression should be slowly applied. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. If you have any other questions, please email me, and we'll see you virtually.